Outlaws of Thunder Junction has been fully previewed. So, as per usual, I look at the set and I pick out what I believe are going to be the top 10 cards for Standard. These are cards that I believe will have an impact on Standard, will see a lot of play, and as per usual, it's my opinion. So, feel free to dispute whatever decisions I've made on this list and let me know which card you feel I left out or what card I put in that you really think should not be in that list. Please let me know in the comments. Also, just for your information, even though Outlaws of Thunder Junction has been fully previewed, there are still cards being previewed of the Big Score set. And Big Score, even though it'll go in the same packs as the Thunder Junction packs if you are into Standard, the set is getting released alongside it, but it is kind of like an epilogue set like Aftermath, and it's nothing but mythics. So I left that set out of the main set for the purpose of this video, and I will probably do a separate set review for Big Score once that's fully previewed. So stay tuned for that on my channel. Let's go ahead and dive right in on number 10. I've got Campbell, Profiteering Mayor. 1 white and a black for legendary creature, Human Advisor. It's a 2/4. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your opponent's control, for each of them, create a tapped token that's a copy of it. This ability triggers only once each turn. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So this is a really neat card because it does a couple different things here. And it applies to different situations. You can play Campbell as a bit of a hate card against token decks. Think of Boros Convoke, which is one of the, if not most dominant aggro deck in Standard right now, which relies heavily on token generation. Whether it is the clue token on your 1-drop or your Gleeful Demolition creating 3 goblins out of an artifact. If they do Gleeful Demolition as first token generator of the turn, guess what? You get 3 goblins as well. And whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, your opponent loses a life and you gain a life. So there is a little bit of extra perk there where you kind of gain and drain your opponent whenever you create those tokens, which is great against aggro. Every bit of life gain helps against aggro. Even if it's only like 1 every couple turns, it adds up. It matters. And then getting those tokens to be able to block their tokens is huge. So Campbell is a great hate card, but Campbell is also a great card if you just have a token deck yourself. A lot of token decks will be running white. That is the main token color. Typically, it's Celestia or Mono White. It's very easy to splash black for Campbell and then include a couple other really good black cards. So it's very easy to pivot into an Orzhov or an Abzan token deck just to have Campbell. And even with Boros Convoke, you might even go Mardu. So you have white, red, and black, so you can include Campbell for the mirror match, and it's really powerful against it. So Campbell is just going to find a spot in a couple different slots there, whether it's an Orzhov mid-range hate card against the token decks, or whether it's just a card that you put in your token decks or token-generating decks, like Boros Convoke becoming Mardu, or Celestia becoming Abzan, whatever that may be. Overall, just a very flexible card. So let's go to number 9. Number 9, I've got Vin Hydra. Vin Hydra is X and green for creature Hydra 0/0. It has Vigilance, Trample, Haste. Vin Hydra enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. When Vin Hydra dies, create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to its power. Really cool. This kind of feels like the dragon in red that is red and an X and just flies over and hits. So from a damage standpoint, it's a really intriguing card in green because it has that trample, vigilance, and haste. So the turn you play it, it'll attack, it'll trample over if it's big enough, and you can block with it on your turn, which is relevant because if it dies in combat then, for whatever reason, you basically get a refund on the mana you put in that you can use a turn later. So it's really, really solid from a value standpoint. It's almost free. It just costs an extra turn to get the value back. Very powerful card. This can get really big really quickly. The only reason I don't have it higher in the top 10 and why I even wasn't sure if it should go in the top 10 is because of the sheer amount of exile effects. Now, granted, there's only a couple exile effects at instant speed. That's why I still wanted to include it because the haste matters. The haste makes this a very big puncher. to where your opponent really has to keep mana open to be able to deal with it at instant speed. So if they have the White March or Wandering Emperor, those are really the two main exile effect spells at instant speed that could really hose this card. That'll be a major feels bad, is if you play this for however much mana and your opponent just hoses it with March or Wandering Emperor. But you're not going every card's not going to be great in every instance. Now another downside, and that's why the haste is so important, is it does lose it dies to temporary lockdown. Sunfall obviously hoses any kind of creature, and farewell. So those are cards you see a lot in standard right now. So those cards really make Gold Vin Hydra less good. But like I said, really those instant speed ones are the only ones that really hurt Gold Vin Hydra. Otherwise, it can be a really powerful trampling haste monster that even if they have like a small token that they want to block with or their land creature they want to block with, you're probably still going to trample over with a lot of damage if you ramp into it. And there's a lot of really good ramp. I could see this as kind of like a topper or like an extra creature in those big ramp decks that are currently going around in standard, just to have a big body to attack if the combo doesn't work out or if the combo gets hosed, or maybe even as a sideboard card in those kinds of decks. It's a very, very cool card, very powerful, and I really like that it can replace itself if it gets destroyed. Going to number 8, we've got Ashiok. Just kidding. It's Jace Reawakened. That's a joke based on the story if you read it. Jace Reawakened is blue for legendary planeswalker Jace. Comes in with 3 loyalty. You can't cast this spell during your first, second, or third turns of the game. So you have to wait till turn 4 before you can play this card. Draw a card, then discard a card for +1 loyalty. Just simple loot effect, always good. Especially on a 2-mana planeswalker, that is really not bad. And then it has 4 loyalty right after you do that. So all in all, actually really, really solid. The other +1 ability is when it gets really, really interesting. You may exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your hand. If you do, it becomes plotted. Plotted means that it is in exile, and you can play it at a later time at sorcery speed for free. So basically what happens is you +1, name a card. Wedding announcement. No, that's not the one that I'm thinking about. Anyway, any 3-mana card. I'm completely blanking for whatever reason. But any 3-mana card, or 2 or 1. You pick it, you get +1 on your Jace Reawakened, it goes into the plotted zone, and then maybe a turn later or whatever you play it at sorcery speed completely for free. That is incredible value. Because then what happens, you spend 2 mana on a planeswalker that your opponent's going to have to deal with, and you're getting free spell out of it. And potentially getting multiple free spells out of it if your opponent doesn't deal with this card in time. -6 until end of turn. Whenever you cast a spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. Copying spells is always great. I mean, that's another basically free spell, if you will. It kind of plays around counters because they have to counter both copies. But I really think that second +1 ability is where Jace Reawakened shines and where Jace Reawakened is going to be really, really busted. And in standard, it's already going to be really good. Older formats, there's already some really broken combos with Jace Reawakened. Going to number 7. 3 steps ahead. It's 1 blue for instant with Spree. Spree meaning that you can pay additional costs for additional mana, basically, to get additional abilities. So it's kind of like a modal card. So for blue +1 in a blue, you can counter target spell. So ultimately, it's a counter spell for 1 blue in a blue. For +3, create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control. So effectively, for blue and 3, you can create a token of an artifact or creature that you control, which can be really, really powerful if you have strong enter the battlefield effects, or if it's like a bigger creature, then for only 4 mana, you make a copy of it or an artifact. And the other +2 is draw 2 cards and discard a card. So ultimately, you can do blue and 2 for draw 2, discard, which is also really powerful. Or you just sink a ton of mana into this. Let's say you go... it's actually almost very much like a Sublime Epiphany, which is one of my favorite cards. which is weird to say because I'm not a big blue mage. But Sublime Epiphany is a great card. So this could be ultimately, let's do the math here real quick. So 1, 4, 5, 6, and 2 blue. A little bit more expensive, but for 6 and 2 blue, you will counter target spell, create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control, and you draw 2 cards and then discard a card. That's a lot of mana to sink into it, but I'm just saying it's a possibility. Maybe you only counter something and you draw 2, discard a card, depending on how much mana you have open. Maybe you only pick one of these options. That's why it's in the top 10, because all those options are great options, and you have the opportunity to do 1, 2, or 3 of those, depending on where you're at on your mana and what makes sense for your turn. Very, very flexible card and potentially very, very powerful. Sublime Epiphany has won me many games. This has kind of the opportunity to do the same thing, just at a lower power level as Sublime Epiphany did it. So, very powerful card. I really think you're going to see this in a lot of decks. It's going to replace a lot of the counters simply because of that flexibility. A lot of counters are at 2 mana, but having that extra bit of mana for the counter spell, just to have the flexibility of the other options, I think that is the reason why this card will see a lot of play. Number 6, Pillage the Bog. Black and green for a sorcery. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is twice the number of lands you control. Put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You can also plot this for 1 black and a green. So this is kind of nuts. Feels very much like Assemble the Teams in Alchemy. I think that's the name of the card, where you look at the top third of your deck and you pick a card to put in your hand. This is not as broken as that is, because you typically won't have 10 lands in play in Standard. Most games don't take that long. Now, granted, the new kind of lands combo deck does, but most Standard games don't take that long. But still, even at just playing this on curve, you play this with 2 mana on the board, you look at the top 4 cards of your library and put one of those in your hand. That already is really solid value for 2 mana. If you have 4 lands in play and you cast this, you look at the top 8 cards of your library and put one in your hand for only 2 mana. Now, you might plot this and just whenever if let's say you have a turn where you have extra mana, you put this in your exile, and then later on you cast it for free and look at however many lands times 2. That value is incredible, and this card will be a staple in any deck in these colors. It's silly not to run this card because it is such a great way to find answers, or the combo piece you're looking for, or that synergy piece you're looking for, just a removal spell, whatever it is that you're looking for. Pillage the Bog is a great way to get there. And even if it whiffs, you have looked at so many cards at the top of your deck that are now going to the bottom of your library, it really increases your chances for a better draw afterwards. So all in all, just super flexible card, very powerful, and we'll see a lot of play. All right, we're at the top 5. Number 5, we have Maresa, Dealer of Death. Blue, black, and red for legendary creature Human Rogue. It's a 3/4. Whenever you commit a crime, you may pay 1. If you do, look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Crime is anything that targets an opponent, whether it's their creatures or them, their planeswalker, their enchantments. As long as it's something that targets the opponent or something of the opponent, it is considered a crime. So any kind of removal spell is a crime. Discard spells are a crime, as long as it's something that targets that opponent, not each player or each opponent. No, it has to be target opponent. Grixis colors do that a lot. Grixis colors have a lot of targeted removal, targeted discard. So Marchesa has an opportunity to trigger a lot. And what makes it so powerful is Grixis midrange has kind of been gone since Fable got banned. Marchesa is an incredible value engine. Grixis has every potential to get really powerful again. They've got some really solid cards in the last sets. They're just not getting there entirely. A card like Marchesa can really push them over the edge. This is what Grixis has been missing, is a really strong card advantage generator. And Marchesa is that. And in colors that have a lot of targeted removal, that is just very, very, very powerful. So I feel like Marchesa will see a lot of play and will make Grixis very relevant again. And honestly, you can play this in Grixis mid-range. You can even play this in Grixis control as one of the very few creatures that you run. It's just such a great value engine that if you just play a lot of removal, you'll be basically selecting a lot of cards from the top of your library for only 1 mana. And filling your graveyard, so maybe even have some graveyard synergies with Grixis. So maybe it brings Grixis Reanimator back with Grixis Command. Super solid card, super flexible, and just incredible value generator that I really think Grixis is going to see much more prominent spot in standard meta because of Maresa. Go to number 4. Great Train Heist. Another spree card. Red for an instant with spree. +2 in a red. Untap all creatures you control. If it's your combat phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. +2. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain first strike until end of turn. Plus red. Choose target opponent. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to that player this turn, create a tapped treasure token. This is an incredible finisher for any red-based aggro deck, which is pretty much every aggro deck. Whether it's Gruul, whether it's mono red, whether it is Boros. I don't necessarily see this in Boros Convoke because that's typically not what Boros Convoke tries to do, but maybe it is even a finisher up there. This is just so, again, these spree cards are so flexible. I really like these modal options. So let's break them down just one at a time. Because in red aggro, you're probably not going to get to the mana to do all of them unless you're more of a Gruul mid-range aggro build, which is still very viable. I actually, even this standard season, I had a Gruul mid-range build that did really, really well. And Great Train Heist would be a great finisher in a deck like that. But let's break them down one at a time. For the first option, so basically 2 red and a red. You untap all your creatures and get an additional combat phase if you do this during your combat, which is an instant, so you probably would. So you swing with all your stuff. Your opponent is maybe even blocking in a certain way to try to just make it to their next turn. Boom, you hit him with the Great Train Heist for 4 mana, so 2 red and a red. You get another combat phase, and your opponent just gets completely hosed out. Also, there is a lot of creatures in red with prowess. So you play this, and all your stuff with prowess gets bigger, stronger, and you get an additional combat phase. All in all, just very, very powerful. If you go to the other one, that's the one I'm probably least excited about, but it could be a nice little combat trick. For 2 and a red, creatures you control get +1/+0 on first strike. It can kind of blow out your opponent's creatures, but I really think that option is best if you have more mana, it's later in the game, and you use it on top of the other options that are there. Because if you create another combat phase while your stuff has +1/+0 and gains first strike, then it becomes pretty powerful. On its own, I don't think you'll really use it that much unless you really have to. So I think the second option is more of a either you have to because you're in a bad spot, or because you put it on top of one of the other abilities because you just have that much extra mana. And last option, basically a red and a red. Choose target opponent. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to that player this turn, create a tap treasure token. This could be nice early in the game if you're trying to set up for later turns. If you're trying to set up for that bigger turn, is you have 2 open mana, and as you attack with multiple creatures, maybe this is even in Boros Convoke, for example, you swing in with 5 creatures. You play this, maybe they block 1, you still hit them with 4, then you create 4 tap treasure tokens. That is a lot of value. Even if you only do it with like 3 creatures, you get the value back. As long as you do it with more than 2, it doesn't necessarily feel like a waste. Even if you do it with 2 or less, it's still ramp, but just for later turns. Very, very flexible. I really think that the top 2 are meant to be finishers. The last one is meant to be building up towards a bigger turn. Very flexible card. I really expect to see this in aggro decks. At least 1 or 2 copies. Number 3. The Key to the Vault. 1 in a blue for legendary artifact equipment. Whenever an equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, look at that many cards from the top of your library. You may exile a non-land card from among them. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. Equip for 2 and a blue. So ultimately, you're going to pay 5 mana into equipping this to a creature. That's quite a bit, but the value that you can generate is unreal. You equip this to an evasive flyer that has a decent amount of power. Whether it's like a Rafine, whether it's like your Aclazots, for example. That's a really good target for this. You hit him with Aclazots, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, you pick one of those and you can play it for free. That is nuts. If you hit with this 2 or 3 times, you've gotten so much value out of this. You hit somebody with it once, you're potentially breaking even. Once you hit with it twice, you're probably already exceeding the value. Unless you're just really unlucky or your deck building is just not what it needs to be. But all in all, Key to the Vault is a really, really insane way to get a lot of value. Your opponent is going to want to destroy this artifact because just the creatures, you just equip it to something else. That's why it's nice that this is an equipment and not like an aura enchantment that would just go to your graveyard. This is something they're going to have to interact with separately, or it's just going to generate more value potentially. Very powerful card. I like this a lot. Why it's number 3 and not number 1, even though it generates a lot of value and free spells, is again because it is quite a bit of mana investment to get it going. Now, maybe you just have it on a 1-drop flyer, like the little pirate that's 1/1 flyer. Turn 2, Key to the Vault. Turn 3, you equip it, and you just play the top card of your library for free, basically. It's a thing you can do, but it's probably not where you're going to generate the value. But very flexible card, very powerful. If you hit with it a couple times with powerful creatures, you're going to really take away the game. Number 2. We're almost there. Kell the Kid. Green, white, blue for legendary creature, human fairy rogue. It's a 3/3. It has flying and lifelink. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you may cast a permanent spell with equal or lesser mana value from your hand without paying its mana cost. If you don't, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So one of the themes that you kind of see in this set is free spells. And free spells are good. Free spells are very good. Free spells and X returns. That's a good way to break a game. And Kell the Kid has the opportunity to really break the game. By itself, it's already a good body. It's a 3/3 flying flyer with lifelink. That is super good against aggro, unless they lightning bolts it, of course. But other than that, it is a very good anti-aggro card. It can put a decent amount of pressure on, coming in with 3 power. You could equip the Keo to the Archive to the Kid, and then it just so much free cards. Holy cow. You would hit with it, you do 3 damage, you look at the top 3 cards. Anyway, we're evaluating Kell the Kid, not the key of the not the key right now. Kell the Kid. There is a lot of stuff that you're going to be playing from exile. We've got adventures, we've got plotted, we've got just simply cards being in exile. We've got discover. All these cards are going to be coming out of exile, out of anywhere other than your hand, and Kell the Kid will trigger off of it. So all these cards that you'll be playing, you'll be able to put a creature on the board or an artifact, enchantment that is equal mana value or less. So let's say you cast something that you plotted before for 3 mana, you played for free now out of exile, and because it comes out of exile, you can play something else for 3 mana for free. That's an incredible return on your investment. You basically double the value. And that's what Kell the Kid is all about. And the deck building is going to be very tricky. I'm not going to lie. The deck building of Kell the Kid is not easy. But they kind of helped you with that. Because if it gets really bad, like let's say I don't have the permanents that I'm looking for, just ramp. Why not ramp? That's the solution. And if you play green, especially green and blue, when in doubt, just ramp. And Kell the Kid does that. I play my whatever it is from anywhere other than my hand. I don't have a permanent to play, but I have a land. Just play the land and you ramp. It's crazy that it does that to me. That's what really pushes this card over the edge, is that if you can meet that requirement of getting that spell out, then you can actually put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. If you have plotted multiple cards, you can play multiple lands that turn as long as you have them in your hand. So really where Kell the Kid is going to shine is trying to get that deck building where you have like an equal amount of things that will be coming from out of your hand and in your hand, or you can just use it as a ramp card in a deck that has like those Discover and those Adventures. And that just pushes this card over the edge. This is a very, very powerful card. All right, we're at number 1. The very best card for Standard, in my opinion. Smuggler's Surprise. Green for an instant with Spree. +2, mill 4 cards. You may put up to 2 creature and or land cards from among the milled cards into your hand. +4 and a green, you may put up to 2 creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. +1, creatures you control with power 4 or greater gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This just feels really broken. It's very much like Tooth and Nail, where for only 6 mana, which in green is not a lot, okay? For only 6 mana, 4 green and a green, you may put up to 2 creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So for 6 mana, at instant speed, you throw Atraxa and a Titan of Industry. You throw an Italian and Atraxa. You throw to think of other broken big cards, Titan of Industry, or you just 2 Titan of Industries. Good luck. Like, there's just so many really, really powerful cards that you can play with this that just make this really broken. For 6 mana at instant speed, you put 7 drops, 2 7-drops on the board if you do it right. If you need to kind of try to get more better stuff in your hand before you do this, then maybe for you got to pay 2 more mana to make it happen. So for 8 a green and a green, is that right? No, sorry, 6 a green and a green. So 8 mana total. You mill 4 cards, put 2 creature or land cards from among the milled cards into your hand. Then you put 2 creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Now those 2 cards, creature cards, have to come from the milled cards. So it's not like it's just a reanimator, if you will. So there's a little bit of variance there to keep it somewhat fair, but still it's incredibly broken. And then that last option is a nice little kind of like heroic intervention, if you will, for big creatures. So your little creatures are still going to be dead, but hexproof and indestructible for your bigger stuff is pretty interesting. Only thing that's kind of a bummer is Sunfall and Farewell is still very much cards. So just like everything else that I talk about, it gets hosed by Sunfall. Sunfall is just a stupid card that really shouldn't be around. But whatever. Control players got to have their thing too. Smuggler Surprise, I really think is going to be such a broken card that is going to really shape the meta and make it to where at once certain decks get to this 6 mana, it's just going to be game over because of the sheer value that's going to come from it. So that's why I put Smuggler Surprise at number 1, is because it's just a finisher. All the other cards are great and powerful and will get the game to really skew it in a certain direction, but Smuggler Surprise is a finisher. And especially because it's at instant speed, where it's like, okay, you just Sunfall my entire board, end step, boom, deal with my Titan of Industries. You can have 2 7/7s and 2 4/4s on the board, and it's just going to be game over just like that. So Smuggler Surprise, very, very powerful card. Very seems incredibly broken to me, and I cannot wait to build with it. Anyway, that is my top 10. Like I said, feel free to interact. So let me know in the comments what you think. If there's cards that you think I left out, let me know, and I would love to talk about it. Don't forget to check me out on Twitter. I do a lot of more Magic Gathering stuff there. Hit the like button, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.